flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first up is the approval of the minutes from our last board meeting, August 9th. Look at them. Are there any corrections? Motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second? Thank you, Will. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries unanimously. Next up is our public comment time, and I just want to say for the record that we got a lot of requests to move our public comment to the beginning of our meetings, and so last meeting was the first time we used the different style for public comment. This is the time that the board will allow 15 minutes for comment on public matters that are not on the main agenda. Members of the audience are encouraged to briefly address the trustees on an issue that is not on the agenda. The chairman of the board will seek comments from the audience on significant items as they occur. Public matters do not include any pending legal matters, private personnel issues, or private student issues. Please do not attempt to address such issues at this time, or you will be ruled out of order. Please note that individuals will be given 3 minutes for public comment. Time may be shortened to accommodate numerous speakers. Public comment will also be allowed near the conclusion of the meeting for those wishing to give public comment, but were unable to do so at the beginning of the meeting. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, we will move on to the financial information reports. That is on. Everybody. On this agenda item, the attachments that we have are the 4 reports that we and I can open those now. These are as of June. I will say we're still finalizing our report, and we've made a couple. The reports that I'm referring to are these ones. First one is, I guess I'm not looking at my own screen, like you can see. Okay, so this one is the one where on the left-hand side of the screen, we show the adopted budget for the year and then the expenditures. This is as of June 30th of 2022. The good thing here is that we have no, for the budgeted funds, we don't have any, right? And then the right-hand side of this report is just a recap of the expense or the revenues that we've collected so far in the year. So the top half is all the elementary funds. It starts with all the budgeted funds, and then we address the cash funds, which have a cash balance in there. So those are the elementary ones, and then the next, if you scroll down to the next page, then the ones in blue are all the high school funds, same format, budget versus actual, and then the recap of the revenues. Right. Next report is the cash flow report, which is I'm sorry, the next one. I'm sorry.
So the next one is the cash flow report for all the funds. The ones at the top are the elementaries, and the ones that are at the bottom of the high school. It just shows the ending cash balance in all of our funds. Out there, and those are our ending cash balances. And then next one is the insurance financials. And good this year, Delia and I are working on, I think we're waiting on this, IDNR, the IDNR. We're waiting for, some, more accurate estimates from Scott. But they're probably going to be close to what you said. The noteworthy thing here is this amount highlighted in yellow. Net revenue is over $1 million. Balance sheet that we're, and that's where we're at the end of June. And then the next report shows the combined statement activity, which shows the dental premiums, the health premiums, premiums that are paid by retirees, and then the premiums received for the flex and the life and long-term disability. And then, so we get a gross profit amount there on the very far right of $8.2 million, and then we deduct all of the various fees that we pay to come down to the expenditure of $6.5 million. So our net operating revenue is this 1. Then we take care of the fees. So this is where that 1.044,175.37 from the balance sheet. That's where that's. So it's the difference between the premiums and the reimbursements brought in, less all the claims paid out and the various fees. As of June 30th. And then the next report just shows that activity at the same time last year. All the way down to the bottom, we're actually about $421,000 better off than we were the year before. Making some progress.
Oh, I wouldn't be too optimistic. June 30th was the lowest amount of claims that we've ever had at 365,000, and match that with 322,000 of stop loss reimbursement. Makes it an unbelievable month that we'll probably never see again. So no, things will change quickly in the next couple of months. No, back to normal.
Okay, and then the last report there is the food service report. Shows the income and the expenditures of the food service, and then the cash balance. We ended the year with a cash balance of almost 1.4 million. And I was explaining this to the finance committee on Friday that at the end of the year, the OPI, well, they won't do this until January when they finalize the trustees' report, but the school finance division at OPI will report to the school nutrition program at OPI. Those districts that had an ending cash balance food service fund that exceeds 3 months of expenditure. That's a requirement of the Fed. You're not supposed to have in excess of. And all these years that I've been working in this business, that's always been the rule. But if a district has plans for the excess funds, then the school nutrition program just documents that and it kind of, so it's not like any money is, they're just required by the federal government to follow up on those things. So since it's been a long time since I've actually dealt with that situation, I decided to call OPI, Chris Emerson, who's the head of the school nutrition program, and she said that the rules are still the same, the process is still the same, and a lot of school districts will be exceeding that 3 months of expenditures in their cash balances for the same reason that we are, and that's because we have all that federal reimbursement money for all meals. So she even attended a training where the federal folks were kind of encouraging state agencies to be lenient with school districts and work with them, you know, on that particular requirement. So all is well. I don't think we'll, you know, be having to send back any funds. I know that Jana has plans for purchasing a food van, 7 new different little proposals she's on that I don't have all that she'll be spending that down. So with that, we had a conversation at the finance committee meeting, and I would like to be able to provide financial reports, maybe not every meeting for the board, maybe semi-annually. Certainly if it's something significant arises that, you know, we want to call your attention to, we'll, you know, run that by the finance committee and bring it to the board. But I'd like to maybe scale back the frequency of reporting to quarterly for the, and then semi-annually board. And then I'd like to restructure I'd like to combine that budget report, those first 2 that you saw, and maybe combine those into one. The primary responsibility of any board is to respond to it. I do like the idea of starting every meeting with a budgetary report, but I'm fine with it being scaled back to saying, here's the thing coming up that, you know, you said, here's the thing of note on this. I mean, just, but I do think it's really important that every board member looks at these numbers, thinks about them every month, because to me, that is one of our primary responsibilities. I always have to say, I don't want a very short report of just, hey, remember we're buying curriculum next month, or, you know, this number looks big, or taxes are coming in, and that's why this number looks low. But I think really, because I know you guys want the warrants, but it's easier, at least for me, to hear it from you than to, and even ask questions quickly. And help the other. That's just me.
Yeah, so, I originally brought that idea of it. A lot of the numbers are just the reports that are out there are pretty self-explanatory. Anytime report they haven't built extra time spent that we really need. I use reports, and one of my comments to Denise when I was talking about it is, if there is something unnecessary, that look at numbers, those numbers repetitive and very rarely are questioned. Some anomaly, so that's just my opinion.
So, we, last couple of years, took votes on because we were so far in the hole.
decreased the premiums, I think. Broke it out where we're responsible for responsible. Just so we can climb out of it. This year, we've done really well, got extra money. I'm just wondering where we are with it.
Another question.
So we're paying back on this debt.
We haven't made a
Jack, I
payment
think
on
Jack
it.
can explain it.
Well, part of the discussion was for the finance committee to review everything quarterly and to bring it to the board, like in July or August, and then in January or February on a six-month semi-annual type basis. For the health insurance, I'd still like to see monthly ones, even though they don't come to the board, but at least from the finance point of view, because I think it's still not, even though there's premium increase, about 4% premium increase, or I can't remember what we have, and even though the financials look good, I'm going to call it an anomaly. So I'd still like to see monthly health insurance. As far as the food services go, the need for $600,000 is what would cover 3 months worth. So there's excess in there, and I don't think Janet's going to be able to save all the excess. But the ultimate question for me there is, if OPI is going to be lenient, then we can leave the balance in there as opposed to transferring it to the interlocal agreement, I would assume, at least for the next 12 months anyways. Okay, so as long as we're aware of that. And then as far as the other two reports for the monthly cash flow, or the monthly percent of the budget that is still unspent versus spent, those are all good, but I think just having those twice a year is sufficient for our needs. Because the finance committee still goes over things closely now, and anybody's welcome to attend the finance committee meeting. There's no off limits to it. But if you're not tuned into numbers, it'll just be a blur to most people, and I guess that's the conclusion now. I'm not trying to offend anybody by saying that, but you've got to know which numbers to really look at to know where the concerns arise. And as long as on the first one where it talks about reserves being fully funded, as long as those are fully funded, then we're in good shape, because a lot of districts don't like to fully fund reserves, and then all of a sudden they have a serious cash flow problem in September, October, and in March and April, and that's not good. Whereas we've always that's been the highest priority, is to have that. As far as the cash accounts, that's something that is a reconciliation format to make sure that the district's numbers match the county numbers. And as long as you're aware of that, and we have a positive balance, and going through that exercise identifies where negative balances occur, and there's nothing wrong with a monthly negative balance on those, because the county's looking at the total picture of all the account values, and we are too, but we have to resolve those. And just because we don't get a report doesn't mean Denise isn't trying to resolve that, because that's the monthly reconciliation. And as long as that's being performed, then there's no, or that'll have its own alarms in it, but they're just a month-to-month type of alarm, not an annual. Because if there's a negative cash balance going into the springtime, we need to know that it's going to be resolved, and we'll know that in January or February when we have it. So a lot of it comes down to understanding the mechanics of how all of the accounts mix and match with each other, both at the county level and at the district level. So that was part of, even though not all of this was discussed at finance, that's the concept behind it. So I guess that's my input. I'm fine with the finance committee reviewing everything quarterly and then bringing it to the board twice a year. But no, it's not, things are not gonna be ignored, I can assure you of that, because there's already steps and procedures in place to make sure monthly reconciliation occurs, just like we're supposed to do on our personal checking accounts, even though my wife does it and I don't do it.
Can you talk about that?
Oh, on the,
Us being,
well, there's still an outstanding $725,000 loan in there that was put in there 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and in the, call it the memorandum that might have been created at that time, was when the cash balances reach certain thresholds, then certain amounts of money will be reimbursed to the interlocal agreement fund to cover that loan. None of that has been hit yet, and I don't pretend to believe that we're at it right now just because we see a positive cash flow in there. So at some point in time, we'll either start receiving money or we may need to forgive the loan. And in private industry or in your private lives, when a loan is forgiven, that becomes taxable income to you if you don't know that. But in this particular case, that's not it. So we still need to remember that even though it's a positive cash flow, there's still an outstanding debt, and we'll have to make a decision at some point in time as to how to address that. How'd I do, Micah?
I thought you did really well, Jack. And maybe to simplify the response a little bit is, our health insurance fund, and not every dollar's been counted, but we're in the black, for the first time in a long time. And, that memorandum that Jack was referring to was an agreement that when we reached a certain reserve in, the health insurance fund, then a certain percentage of that would be starting to be applied back to the loan. So first we have to reach that limit, whatever it was, maybe a certain percentage of that. What we were really trying to do is build up a reserve within our. It's better than it's ever been, as long as I've been in the district. We're just starting to see daylight on that.
Any other questions? Will, go ahead.
It's not like cash.
That's a good question. I've been, no, they don't to me. I don't know why some are darker yellow than others. Is that what you're
I was
talking
just
about?
wondering.
I'm gonna assume because Delia does a lot of this, that it's just a way to check and balance things. A lot of times you just put little things in there to say, okay, I need to double check this, but I'm gonna say it's just an internal function of double checking things.
Here to read too, because it seems that every other one is. I'm sorry. And then there's some in bold, but those are the building fund and the building reserve fund are in bold and. Infrastructure and combination of each other. So the very far right column just shows the reserves, the operating reserves that we held in certain funds, and they're restricted. By law, you can only have 10% that's held in reserve. that's what that percentage is.
Well, the simple part is law allows you to have reserves in some of them and not in other ones. And the ones that have the reserves are tax-generated ones. And so the only time you get the revenue from those is in, December 1st and June 1st. And so that's why you need to have the reserves, and they allow by law. The other ones are not, tax-generated ones in the same format.
I got it.
Although two of my board members disagree with me, I still do really think it's important to support board members having an awareness of this, on even a monthly, even in every meeting basis. And I know everyone can go to finance, although everyone can't necessarily because some people work at that time. But, I think the idea of just this is something you need to pay attention to. And to keep it, I hear this term sea of numbers or numbness to numbers, or I can't remember the exact expression. But to me, this is what keeps it from being that. Rather than saying, piles and piles of numbers. This is the number, twice she said, this is of note. And so it reduces it from that thing I could look at that would make no sense to, not me personally, but things one could look at to, look at this, pay attention to this. And I really think it's very easy for boards to get caught up in day-to-day things or not realize that this is one of their day-to-day things and needs to be one of their central responsibilities. And having those tools to keep us on top of it, and to me, the tool is not access to the spreadsheet. To me, is Denise explaining it to stupid little old me. And especially if we're a newer board, 2 or 3 of our members are less than a year old. Denise herself is less than a year old here. I really think keeping that connection to the budget help is important. Yeah, maybe just me. I'll just start calling you every week.
What if, just a matter of practicality, because I said we have to reconcile everything. What if these reports were included in the consent? Moving anything, but it can be brought up in the consent. During that time, you can pull something out. Trustee, has to have it discussed in the format. This is something so that awareness is like, this doesn't go away. It's just a matter of, are we going to spend this amount of time glossing over, the current financials? I don't know how much the board really cares how much premiums are collected every month. It's roughly the same amount. So you just have these big documents, and maybe if there's something that's validated, or it's just like, here's the number that really interests you in where we're at on the health insurance fund. But kind of like we talked about in finance, we don't, we look at the food service fund, but we don't look at the transportation fund. We don't break down any other budget. Jack said, well, maybe it's partly because it's almost like what was the term you used? Proprietary fund or enterprise.
Oh, enterprise.
But it's not really. So part of it was just trying to make valuable use of the board's time when we're here, glossing over, these documents. Your point's well taken. I don't think there's anything that the board. It's just a matter of how much time we want to spend.
And I'm totally okay with minimizing it, but I would at least like a 5-minute report from me. Hey, notice.
In addition to the consent agenda, we are going to start having committee reports, which would be a perfect time for the chair of the finance committee, Scott, to, give a short report on that in addition to a consent agenda. Because I agree, this is one of the more important things. We need this information, but to what extent? The finance committee, if we have faith in them, which I do,
probably not gonna get into that then, but.
That works for me at least. We do have a report from finance.
So, what's everybody's comfort level with it being consent agenda as well as a committee report? And Jack has another comment.
Well, the consent agenda is designed for approval of things, not for information. So I would say it would still be there, but my remarks from Denise would be, anybody have any questions? And from our point of view, the only time that we should really have questions is if we see red up there. And if you've looked at everything and you have a question because of red, then bring it up. But if there's no red, then I don't know that there's really a concern. And it doesn't matter which report, because they all, the food services, we can set the spreadsheet up so that the red appears, which doesn't currently appear. So it can all be done. But to me, if everybody looks at it ahead of time, then Denise's comment is, any questions? And if not, move on. Because it's the red that would be the issue, not the black.
Like I said, I'm totally fine with reports from the finance committee, that works. But as a comment that everyone can just, at that point, you can say that about it. If you've done the reading, there's no reason to be. Who's an expert is very different. And perhaps you being in finance, this is easier. But for some of us, we need to be reminded, pay attention to this. And we even need some, for instance, the taxes only come in twice a year, so there are reds in there, and I might forget that it's October, not November, or, you know what, so having some is helpful for me to wrap my head around.
Part of the purpose of a board is everybody brings different skill sets in, and there needs to be some trust and confidence, and that's why the committees exist, in order to oversee the things. So for me, curriculum isn't an interest, so those people that are on curriculum, I trust what they're doing on there, and I'm not gonna question it at all. Policy, I was on that for many years, and I haven't been on it since, because I understand policy and direction. But so for me, the purpose of the committee structure and the purpose of trust and confidence and the oversight that we all bring, because we all have different levels, areas of interest, that I'm looking to see, well, where does that exist? And to me, that's one of the significant things of a board.
I hear where Rebecca's coming from, and I also, from the other side of being not good with numbers, you would think Denise's reports would be additional for somebody like that, but for me, it's easier to look over the report, reach out to Denise and be, I'm confused with this portion, so she can walk me through that, versus it's hard to see that screen. It's very hard for Matt to keep up with wherever Denise is at. We can scroll through here trying to follow Denise as well, but sometimes I feel like it's a little bit much at our meetings. It takes up a lot of time. And that's where I'm kind of leaning on what these other guys are saying, where we can cut over. But I hear where you're coming from with that. I agree with you 100% that it definitely is something we need to keep our eyes on. It should always be present. So I like what Micah has presented, where it's there. It's brought up where Denise can say any questions. We bring them in at that time. But I just feel like the way we've been doing it, it's a blur. And we're nodding our heads and waiting to move along. Not sure that I know what you're looking for with it, Rebecca, but I'm not sure that we're getting that out of the reports every.
Any other comments from people, or are we comfortable setting the report back, but still keeping it on the radar, a monthly radar, part of the consent agenda and committee reports? Especially, new trustees who are just familiar with the whole budget process?
I'll just say, as a newbie, that I agree with Rebecca. Like, I look at it and you're scrolling and she's talking and I lose some of it, where when I can just go in and look at it when the agenda is sent out and I can look at that report by myself, and knowing that Denise is available if I have questions, I like that. I like that the finance committee goes over everything and then they can come back and report to us. I don't feel like the amount of time that we take to look at this is valuable.
Good to hear from a newbie. Well, I don't think we need a formal vote on it, but I think in the effort to create some more time for more valuable discussions, perhaps we should, and you are always welcome. Every trustee is welcome to call any of the administrators, and I know it takes a while to get used to reading these and understanding them. It's very good to hear, look for the red print, look for, the yellow bars. It's very good to get that kind of information. So I would not want to go without that, but, I said, did you have something to add?
But I think you hit on a key word. Let's, if this isn't working for us, we can always, we would feel better if we're getting them work, and we can always come back to it.
You okay with giving it a try? Good discussion. Next up, change to process for purchase approvals. This is information only. Denise, are you presenting this one also?
I am, thank you. A second recommendation from me with regard to, the practices that we have. At our last meeting, we just, had a formal board adoption of an agreement. And, many of the items that we bring before you, that, cost over $10,000 and ask you, we ratify the finance committee and then we have to bring the board for their approval. The majority of those items are already within the adopted budget. So it feels like getting a second round of approval on those. And, so I'd like to, stop doing that for items that are already within the approved budget, because I just don't think that second needed. Instead, I would like to, and I talked to the finance committee about this on Friday, that it may be more efficient for us as the administration to bring proposals that by law are required to have a bid, and that's $80,000. And then anything that is not included in the adoption. So just kind of changing up the practice a little bit. Agenda items about.
Just on the old crank today. I totally understand, because I have looked at a lot of the $10,000 items and been like, hey, didn't we already approve, what is going on with this? But, it also, I have over the years felt like it actually keeps me in touch. If we're buying a new piano for Flathead, as we did 2 years ago, or if we're buying, I don't know, band uniforms or wrestling uniforms, that's already in their block grants. That's not actually our business, okay or not okay. But I do have learned to actually value and enjoy, or learn, it's a better tie into the schools to me almost than having somebody come report, oh, we had a dance last week, but here, that piano we've been talking about for 3 years, actually getting purchased this week, or the scoreboard for KMS, or whatever the items over 10,000 we've seen over the years. So I guess I don't feel we need to approve them, but I wouldn't mind them being informational items, like just a little informational list, because it actually does help me at least keep connected to what's going on in the school. It's not part of our board meeting. But again, it's probably just me.
So part of our conversation is, the fact that we do send a warrant list to the board it's every week now because we're that way. And, I actually had a board member follow up on items that he's on the list. And so, we were kind of hoping that people, as they were reviewing the list, if they saw, these items, what they were about, they could certainly call and ask about them separately. Or I guess ask about it. But just the whole process of gathering the information, going through, a proposal and seeking approval from the finance committee to bring it forward to the full board and having the board, it takes a lot of time and effort for, just a lot of things that we're already here for. And that would appear on the warrant list.
Could that also be included in the finance committee reports, right? Like, oh, this is coming up, we're making this big purchase, or like, over the last 3 months, we made this.
Can I give a little bit of historical perspective to this? And I'm gonna go pick on the IT department, and I'll just go back 10 years when IT purchases district-wide were done by anybody and everybody, and then IT was informed that, oh, we've got this for you to take care of now, whether the item truly fit with the infrastructure or not. And some items had to be returned to Best Buy or some other places because they weren't compatible with the infrastructure that exists. So it started out by trying to centralize everything through IT. And then there were other areas that had similar difficulties in processing things. And then in, I'm going to say 2015, Diane, when we spent 15 hours going over the budget to get a better idea of how it all went. And then with Callie taking the lead that November to zero-based budgeting, where everything had to be proved, and that it involved many administrative hours and meetings where administrators had to defend, and everybody discovered there's no longer going to be any sacred cows. And also, one of the results was the elementary schools ended up having a rotation of certain expenditures to balance and to create fairness and balance across everything. So it's been a long-term process, and part of it was to put in this $10,000 item, and it also was enforced when we had our $54 million bond projects because of change orders. I was going to use the word cost overruns, but I'll use change orders in order to make sure that we understood the necessity of them from a board perspective. So a lot of it came down to getting a better process in place for both budgeting and making sure that items did get included in the budget. Because prior to 2015, many administrators didn't really know what their budgets were or how the money, what was available and so forth. So it became a big educational process. And I think that we've grown and matured from it, where we can now go to the statutory limits and not be somewhat oppressive, even though, yes, there's a lot to learn in the process, and whether it's the activity directors or others that come forth with proposals that have had to get work through that, they spend a lot of time on it, which is good. they still will, but at the same time, it's not, if they've done their homework and created it in the budget, then they don't need to come before the board again a second time. And I guess that's the reason for it, that we've created a process, and that because of the low turnover in many of those areas, the processes are in place now. And that even when there becomes some administrative turnover, I think there's enough others in place to remind them that there's a process to make sure that we've developed the need in the budget and gotten approval there. So it was a 10-year process to get to this point, and that the statutory limits exist for bidding purposes and approval purposes, and that, to me, I think we've grown and matured enough to be able to go to that. And if it doesn't work, then we can always rein it back in again.
Like, I struggled with this as well when it was first brought up in finance. They really didn't understand that it was within the budgeted items. Really started thinking about that. Really not, in my opinion, it's the goal of the board to overlooking administration, and I know this is budgeted, but I want to look at it. Set the budget and give administration the authority to spend within that budget, and that's when I cost states 80. I think we go with state law. That's done an excellent at making sure that all the buildings and are staying within that. On any, I'm totally in favor of it. It brought to me, I had some trepidation to it.
As you were talking, Scott, I was thinking that 90% of our budget is personnel and benefits. And so we have about $100 million budget. That means $90 million is already allocated and approved and going to be spent. So that leaves $10 million left over, and a substantial amount of that is utilities. And that there are other things, but if you look at, if you try to break that down, the other 10 million, and half of that 10 million is for things that you just can't do without. The other half might be a little more discretionary, but when you have 10 facilities, that's $500,000 for each one. And I don't know that that's going to really change a whole lot. Now, that's scattered across activities as well as some purchases. So even though $500,000 is a lot of money, it doesn't go very far when you take into account all the things that it needs to cover. So from a perspective, because I'll just leave it at that.
So, as I started with, I'm absolutely sure we shouldn't be voting on it. I think that that's absolutely true. But I do like being in touch with the school, and keeping in touch with the schools is also an important function of the board. But, I guess what I would suggest is there is an administrative report. And I think, Denise, you do get an administrative report time and the end of meeting report. And I think maybe that time bring up any unusual warrants, not the ones we check the rate every week, but something like 80,000 for wrestling, or, and that might also be the time to say, hey, in the budget, you might not have looked at the numbers closely, this is another thing you want to look at. I'd be okay with both of those being in Denise's administrative report, which I think is bi-monthly, not every month. I think the administrative reports are every other month, they're yeah, just every other meeting, every other meeting, so, yeah. So is that a thing that works for people, or do they just say, no, not here, not these things?
I just give a little perspective from an administrator, and I'll use the tables. Brought me 4 new lunch tables, and it cost $12,000. And from the administrator perspective, it's like, well, I have it in my block grant. It's discretionary, budgeted for, but what I really feel like I'm having to do is beg to get lunch tables, or to get desks and chairs in my building, or to get whatever it is. And so that's part of what's kind of factoring into this, is this, gosh, we need, basketball uniforms. And it's like, okay, Mark and Bryce, you have to show up at a finance committee, you have to get put on the dog and pony show, here's what it looks like, here, and then we go through this, and we spend 20 minutes talking about basketball uniforms. They would bring it back to the full board for the exact same thing. And so it's trying to cut out a little bit of that. And I don't know what Denise feels, but, an administrative report of listing, here's all the things that cost $10,000. Hardly buy anything for a school district that doesn't cost $1,000 anymore, whether it's computers or desks or chairs or carpet replacements or whatever it is. I mean, it's just, when you think about the total time that we spent over the course of a year, if we were to go back and grab all those minutes and look back through all the agendas, we have spent an incredible amount of time going through stuff that just a lot of work administratively to put it into an agenda to get, it goes on and on and on. Even creating an additional report to say, here's a list of all the things that we're, I guess we could do that out of the warrants list item, or I don't know, but it just kind of go back to what Jack said. This was a process that started 10 years ago, and there's and things and safeguards in place, and so it just feels really redundant, and it makes it feel like school administrators are having to think, really getting into the weeds of micromanagement, trustee level, to what's going on within anything that is unbudgeted coming from the board. And if we don't have $10,000 for it, and we need it out, local agreement, it has to come from the board. If it's anything that approaches that 80,000, so now we're looking at, you have to put out those bids. But even our athletic directors are putting out bids for basketball uniforms. They're trying to get 3 bids. Greg's trying to get 3 bids on flooring or whatever it may be. So it just, again, process-wise, we can certainly spend the time doing it. I just don't know if that's the best use of our time. And
following up with what Micah was talking about, and I don't know if anybody here remembers Frank Miller, but Frank and I became a pest to administrators because we were asking a lot of detailed questions and trying to make sure that we weren't overspending, or we were doing away with the philosophy in April and May of, if you don't spend it, you lose it, and looking at ways to avoid premature expenditures on things that really aren't necessary, and also and that there's a lot of growth in many administrators to be more responsible in their vetting of things, and I don't plan on going into details on who those were, but it was and it started 10 years ago, probably, just because Frank and I were on the finance committee together. But we were looked at as enemies, and everybody soon discovered, no, we were not enemies. We were just wanting to make sure we were being prudent and everything. And so I still come back to the growth and maturity of everybody that is still here, that went through those experiences, and are probably saying to others, you don't want to go there.
Any other comments?
I absolutely hear your thing about begging, and that's why I'm saying it should not be a voted on issue. Be voting on means we're telling you, yes, you can buy wrestling mats, and that is not our business. But I do sort of have a concern that, to you, there's a minor amount of money, but to me, when I learned that the new wrestling mats were, I don't know, 80,000, that helps me with my perspective when other items come up, because I do often think, when some item that isn't budgeted for comes up, I'm like, is that a lot of money? Well, it's not as much as we spent on wrestling, because I heard what we spent on wrestling, so it's stuck in my mind. So I worry that both of these might lead to board members being more separated from day-to-day paying attention to finances, which really makes me uneasy. I mean, I was involved in an organization where the board wasn't paying close enough attention and the institution was sold off to another institution, because of negligence essentially on the, right? I know it's easy to gloss over these things, but I really do think it's important to let every board member even know it's really important you look at the numbers on a yearly, semi-annually, and monthly time, because it really can happen that boards not paying enough attention can lead to problems. And I do think, you know, that just saying, hey, the warrants I wrote, this one stuck out as different than the others, I don't see that as begging, but again, you know, if nobody else likes it, I'll just throw all the warrants around. Because it's different having something presented to the whole board and having one board member talk to one administrator. That's a different thing.
Thank you, Rebecca. You know, we do approve the budget, and if an item is on the budget, it's been approved. If we have to bring it up again, you know, we're duplicating our efforts. I mean, we have that chance to look, and we have to have that trust and confidence in our administrators that they are doing their job. If they are not, that's a bigger issue that we need to look at. Rebecca, and I'm going to just direct this to you, would you be comfortable with these items just coming up as part of, you know, committee reports, our quarterly reports? You know, we still will know about them. What's your
I guess
comfort
it's
level?
absolutely not a matter of trust or confidence or begging, you know, yeah. It's just a matter of the board being involved. So I was saying, just like we spend a lot of time having principals and students report to us. To me, this is just another way of reporting, another way of hearing what's happening in the schools. And that's essentially why I like it, is just know that, yay, new lockers, wasn't Elrod that bought new lockers, you know, that, yay, we got new lockers. And then when I go in to visit Elrod, I notice, oh, look, there's the new lockers, aren't they pretty? To me, it's just about keeping the board connected to the school. So, yeah, no, I mean, it's not definitely important to me that it absolutely should not be a voted issue. But I do like, you know, hearing what's happening in the schools. And to me, this is almost a better way of hearing what's happening in the schools than the students and principals coming in. How I like to spend my time.
Anything else? Otherwise, I think we are moving forward with that, giving it a try. It doesn't work. There's some issue that comes up, you know, a bond issue. They want to discuss that one.
We will want to discuss that.
Okay? All right, next one, contracts, food service contracts. You're doing this one too.
This is an annual, contract with, districts you see on here, Cayuse Prairie, Fairmont, Eaton, Helena Flats, Smith Valley, and Trinity Lutheran. Our food service, has meals for them, and this is just a renewal of their contract.
Got one. We already.
About payment.
Yes, well, in payment, it says that, line price of unfair to that. And they're paying more.
It could be because of the milk. I'll follow up with Jana on
You know what you find out.
that.
Very fresh, more, but they're less.
You know, it seems to me that last year we had a similar discussion on this, that there was
Yeah.
something unusual about.
And the year before, and the year before.
I know.
Can never remember what, though.
So if, when you
Should write it
follow up
down.
on it, we'll make a
Make a note.
permanent note,
Yeah.
yeah, because
Referring to Cayuse Prairie, there's two things there. Cayuse Prairie provides the milk, but Cayuse Prairie also has to provide the information to the school district for the meals served for credit for things, is my interpretation of that. So it's two completely different functions in one sentence.
As I recall, this had to do with federal funding, which meant that milk was included, there was the federal funding differed, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the details. But I really remember going, God, I feel like it was years ago, but it's something about how the federal funding formula for reimbursement works with, very specific, that milk be included in a meal for it to reimbursed it all. So since we weren't doing milk with them, or we were doing milk with them, it put them in a different category of some sort, but that's as much as I remember about it.
yeah, that's what I recall too. There was just something unique about that one. We'll get it figured out. These are contracts very similar to what we do every year. Anybody comfortable making a motion?
So I move that we accept.
If you will, is there a second? Heather, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment? Seeing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next up, human resources and personnel. These are personnel action items.
So in front of you, you have a list of our hires for this last period. We have 17 new hires in the last month. 9 of those were instructional or special education paras. But you'll also notice that we had 4 instructional or special education paras resign. So we have kind of a little bit of a revolving door in that area, and still have open positions. So, you know, anybody who's looking for a job, we've got.
Comments, questions? Thank you, Scott. Is there a second? Thank you, Jennifer. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Is it hockey time already?
Yes.
Okay.
We're cutting your pay in half.
Oh, okay, that works.
Next up
What?
is the consent agenda. Nothing on elementary, district-wide.
I'd move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Lance. Is there a second? Thank you, Lloyd. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Information items and reports. Like I skipped some. Trustee reports.
No, I never did.
Let's start with Rebecca. Welcome back, Rebecca.
Thank you. And I actually have a trustee report for once about my trip. My son is a rising junior in high school, so we actually did a few college visits. And it was very interesting to go to schools, admittedly, not high schools or elementary schools, but just, and to see both what the admissions department chose to highlight about their schools and what students and parents took away from those as important. Because it's not what I would have expected. You know, I would have expected it to be, this is our department, and, you know, this is our great department, and this is our great teacher, and it was actually all about support, and it was all about, just little details of that sort of extracurriculars even. I mean, it was all, one school runs a bus around campus, and all the parents were twittering about it. One school, yeah, even runs a bus to the city and stuff. And again, these tiny little details of how we're supporting the students were what both the students took away and the school administration thought was most important for them. And that was somewhat, and tiny details of policy. I mean, they're like, we don't have any requirements outside your department, and students were all like, woohoo, I don't have to take psychology 101, or, you know, and these are the things that really made a school stand out. And I just found that a really intriguing discovery. I wouldn't have called it. I would have said, you know, about how good our economics department is, but it was all about, like, we have mental health support. And I was like, really? Okay. I thought that was very interesting about what makes schools attractive. Scott? Will?
I'll just say that, as I always look forward to summer. We've had a little bit of off time, it feels like. So it does feel a little bit like summer, like I'm back. So I'm looking forward to school visits.
Thanks, Will. Lloyd?
I had the pleasure of going to the Lakeside Summer School Board meeting, this one passed, and meeting them and talking to them afterward. One of the things that they had brought up, since we're focused on security this year quite a bit, is that one thing they're kicking around is having some defensive measures in classrooms. I just thought that was interesting. They were looking at Presidia gel, which is a kind of like a pepper spray, but it's a gel and it has a reagent so that, you know, if it accidentally gets on somebody else, they can wash it off, and it's use it for law enforcement stuff. That was interesting. But they are looking at getting that into the schools. So I thought that was kind of cool since we're looking at that also. But it was really nice hearing how they do things there, and it was eye-opening as to what their budget is versus ours. But anyway, yeah, that's fine.
No report.
I guess I would just say, I work at the Veterans Center, as everybody might know, and we have a bunch of backpacks, like, really focused on all the outlying, because we do 4 counties, we've been serving all the outlying communities, but just maybe to let. I've been trying to email a lot of the schools that have been focusing, like I said, on you know that they're there. I'm out delivering them.
I wanted to make sure everybody knows that NVCC is offering their boardsmanship class once again. It is, I believe, 5 sessions, starting September 28th, and we even have some flyers here, so please feel free to take one. let Andrea know, if you are interested in taking it. This class has been invaluable. I think I've taken it every single year. Maybe I'll graduate this year, I don't know, we'll find out. But let Andrea know if you are interested in taking it, because the district will pay the tuition for you. And, Andrea, will you get them registered too? Great. And the other thing is, I am still in the process of putting together our, liaison, program, our community engagement. I have not heard back from quite everybody as to which schools they would like to represent.
You got our beer last time?
Pizza. But, so that is still a work in progress. Right, Alex? Administrator reports? Oh, well, yes, you all have business cards now. And if I gave it to you early, you missed out on the red ribbons. And if you really want your red ribbons, I got a couple extras in here. I find it very helpful to give out the cards. You will notice that it has your school email address on it, and it has the district phone number. I'm not in the practice of giving schools phone numbers, without their permission. So if you want to put your phone numbers on there, go right ahead. But, get those cards out there.
Trustee, or, admin?
Yeah.
Admin reports, all right, just quick for me, higher education consultants are going to be, in Kalispell the last week of September to do our security audit. We had an ad hoc, group of community members who felt like this was, something very worthwhile to support, and they raised, $70,000 for 9 school districts to have the audit. So we're all set up for that. And last Thursday, all of the K-12 admin and central office admin went through a run lock plate training with Kalispell Police Department. That was really productive, and everybody's gearing up for retraining their staff in September as well. And depending on the developmentally appropriate age of the students, they'll be working with probably high school and really busy time of the year. We are fully staffed with teachers as of today, so that feels really good. We've had some late resignations, and so we're able to get those positions filled. But we are, as I mentioned, we're still short paras, custodians, maintenance engineers, food service workers, substitutes, and we're just going to continue to interview candidates when they get into our system and see if we can find the right fit for us. But we may be starting the year without some of those key will create challenges for us. I think right now we're short 4 custodians across the district, and with 1 or 2 to a building, we find a way. We're still engaged in Chapter 55 discussions. We have a webinar with OPI and school administrators in Montana tomorrow, and we're going to make one last effort to communicate some of our concerns with the way we're for some solutions there. Want to verbally say that all of the trustees are welcome to attend the Yellow Bus Tour, which is Monday and Tuesday next week. And I'll send out an itinerary of what schools, but basically the central office becomes a traveling show. And we go to each of the elementary schools, and then the middle school and high schools in Linderman. And we just do a short presentation welcoming back all of our staff. If you want to come to all 10 and listen to me 10 times over 2 days, you're certainly welcome to. But if you wanted to show up at one, and just to kind of hear what we're communicating and what's going on, that would be great. We encourage you to do that. And Sue covered the board leadership academy. So, I was a little disappointed to see that Denise and Matt were asked to come speak at it, and I wasn't. So it should be good. Yeah.
On the run site lock training, or I think I got that order wrong, will, school counselors and even possibly parents be informed of these in advance so that any students who might have anxiety around these drills be able to at least be prepared for it, or are they, yeah?
Yeah, I think, generally speaking, we don't announce, or we don't we don't do surprise drills, fire drill, lockdown drill, anything like that. Usually, what the training would tell you is you always announce it ahead of time. That way, if the real thing happens, people know that something's going on. To act, take action. We usually do a
Two things, how are our sub numbers? I think a lot of the staff like.
Yeah, thank you. Sub numbers, I'm gonna say we're probably about half of what we would on it, and it varies from day to day and what's going on activity-wise. Where we really struggle is, day afternoons with teachers travel, long distance. Those seem to be the hardest ones to, right now, our building principals are putting out, in their newsletters and welcome back to school, job opportunities. I think it's just where we're at right now, just in terms of employment valley-wide. We do tend to see an increase in substitute numbers once the summer, service industry, starts to wane. So people who are working in the park or working seasonally for, different groups, they'll start to come back.
Are you planning on? We haven't really had that.
Yeah,
Is that
so,
gonna be, that's coming later, I'm totally good.
yeah, no, that's a great question. So we had an MOU, the last 2 years, and it changed on year 2. Year 1, it was just, we're gonna pay a flat $25, for an hour. And then we changed it to rate of pay. And I think that cost us about $130,000, last year, which we were able to use ESSER funds for. And, that's one of those things that when we talk about cliff money, where is that at? In talking with our K-12 admin staff about whether or not we want to continue to pursue that, there is a desire from the, like, it's easier, to ask someone to fill in for a period, knowing that they're gonna get paid for it. But there are other people that really want the comp time, and want to be able to take time off, but become somewhat cyclical. So I build up all this comp time plus my personal days, and suddenly I'm gone for 10 days. I have nobody to backfill for that. So, what we'll do is there's a group of 4, building administrators, and we'll meet with you and talk about it. There was it wasn't totally smooth sailing. The way that the MOU was, everything was well intended, but it created some issues for us. So we want to sit down with you and talk a little bit more about, how we can structure that and make it work. District, as a whole, but also for our employees. Yep.
Is that something as a trustee, like we can volunteer? Classes.
Diana, do you want to talk about your experience?
I thought I was gonna be quiet now.
Yeah.
I lasted 3 days. I'm sure they'd love you.
Yes.
Just to piggyback on that, we are going to send out a blast that's pretty personal to each building site and encourage
that a lot of those needs revolve around the activity schedule. We think that's a high school issue, but we have coaches that are elementary teachers, we have coaches that are middle school teachers, and then they leave for a high school activity or even a middle school activity, and they're missing school, but they're only missing the period. And it's hard to get a sub to come in, wants to be a full day sub, come in for a couple hours, so we end up using an existing teacher that has prep or something during that. So if we could grow our pool of subs that are people that, hey, I don't want to be there all day, but I could be there for the last bit of the day and then take my kiddo home. We really want to try to get a hold of those people. So if you help us spread the word, we appreciate that. It may be a good way to sample it. How are you at a time? And then Micah mentioned this Boardsmanship Leadership Academy. I'm excited to present, and the real reason my name's on the list because I was at the office that day, and I didn't want to call and talk to Pete, and Pete signed me up. And then, this is a true story, and then about 2 weeks later, I get a call from Ivan, and he said, hey, I just want to talk to you about that training you're doing. I'm like, and he said, oh, Pete didn't tell you? And so I go over and he's like, we talked about that. I'm like, oh, we didn't talk about that. The rest of the year, I got Kelly PowerPoint from last year, so I'll be starting there and we'll work on it. And we are gonna make a transition this year since we're talking about curriculum, and you know I'm passionate about that. We're gonna move this thing towards competency-based. So Sue, if you want out of the purgatory that you're living in with this workshop, you have to show competence, and then you'll probably get that diploma. It does not matter how long you sit there, it gives you no material. And then last, just give an update, the daycare, we had a very ambitious group of elementary teachers that got together, they've been coordinating, doing interviews, they consulted with the nurturing center, really did a nice job of dotting I's and crossing T's, and they will hire a director. That director is in the process of getting her license through the state, and then starting a daycare. She will either start at Edgerton or Peterson. We have a space in both buildings. And then grow the program, hopefully into the second space, but starting with one, going to two, and then hopefully this is a model that we can sustain and grow depending on space. And with that, I'll yield the last bit of my time for our presentation, which we will need all of that time for talking.
Thanks, Matt, for throwing me under the bus, but it wasn't exactly how it went down, but I'll let him ride with that one on there. So, just want to give you an update on summer school, and you can see some of the data up there. So obviously summer school, we have two different sessions. So session one goes from June 13th to the 30th, and session two, July 11th through the 28th. Anthony Lapke is the one that oversees that and puts everything together for it. Gets, everybody hired, and it is just quite a process because there's 12 teachers that are involved. Some of them will teach the first session and the second session, some the second session, and not the first session. But if you look, there's 203 students that went through the program, and it's broke down, by the LEC, Glacier, and Flathead. So an opportunity, for them to be able to recover credit over the summer. When we did 380 half credits, so basically 380 semester credits. Some of the students earned more than half a credit, so they had that opportunity. And thank you for some of those that were there this summer and you came up for the graduation, because it shows that, hey, this is just important, to them, graduating in the summer, and you could feel that with the parents. So thank you, for taking the time to come up there. And I did spend quite a bit of time, a couple of days up there talking with Anthony and watching the students, and they were really getting after it, it's tough. I mean, they struggled during the school year, with getting their work complete and then failing, and then they're in there in the middle of the summer and they're really kind of getting after it. So, just kind of breaking some things down for you that maybe is not on there, but they had 285 students that signed up, and you can see there's 203 that completed. There's 27 that, withdrew prior to the start of the session. And then they had like 30 no-shows, and 25 that started but didn't earn credit. So, overall, still pretty good. The good thing, so I'm gonna, give you a little bit of the good and the bad. So the good thing is the cost for the students is free. So, bad part is, you know, for the district, we do commit $76,000, you know, for the program. And I'm kind of lead into that, you know, a little bit. It kind of breaks down to about $200 per, semester credit, for the students. You know, we are fortunate to have the ESSER funds. Most of it was tagged out of, ESSER 3 and then some out of ESSER 2. So, you know, how fortunate are we to, you know, to be able to do that? And so, Mike and I, spent a little bit of time, you know, analyzing some of the data. So you take a look, go to the next slide, Matt. You know, taking a look at, you know, some of the data, and I'll just kind of give you, you know, an example. You know, trying to break down, you know, the failure rates. And, as principals, that's something that we always did. We always looked at the failure rate in each areas and, you know, why are students, you know, failing. And so I kind of broke it down, you know, taking a look at English 1A, English 1A and went through that. So I think you can see on there was, 30, so just using English 1A, I think you go down one more slide, Matt. There you go. So just using English 1A as an example, so that's freshman year, semester 1. You know, there was 31 half credits that were basically recovered out of there. So went through and just trying to analyze some of the data and looking at it and looking at, you know, some of the failure rates, you know, with English 1A within, and it's about 11.5%, you know, for our students. So, you know, 31 were able to recover, but there was 87 overall that had failed English 1A, and this is across both schools, the LEC.
Any way to tease out the data to see whether that was in-district students or some of our partner school districts, kids coming in and having that failure rate?
And that's a good question, because, you know, that's what we want to do. Is I'm just showing you this as an example, but we really want to dig down into some of this. I mean, we're very fortunate, like I said, you know, and Mike has said, to be able to offer summer school for our students and to be able to get them caught up. But what we really want to dig into, and we used to do this as principals, was, okay, looking at the failure rate, and why are we doing this? And hey, we're helping, you know, these students, so I'm going to take it to a 9 through 12 administrative meeting, and then, you know, start analyzing some of that data. And it's like, okay, well, what are we going to do with the other 50-some students, you know, that didn't? Because then it just compounds, especially when it comes to English. It's like, okay, they failed the first semester, they're going to be behind. And then, you know, what I find fascinating about it is a great conversation for personalized learning, work-based learning, and transformational. Because, all right, hey, if this isn't working for them now, what are some other things that we can be doing? Because they're going to be, you know, falling behind the entire time. But just kind of wanted to give you a snapshot. You know, this is something on our radar. I know it's something that's on our principals' radar all of the time, taking a look at failure rates, analyzing that, you know, and what can we do, you know, to be better at giving our students those opportunities. And it might not be within the traditional classroom. So, you know, I think that's going to help with some of our discussions around work-based learning. Questions?
Well, and Pete, I've found also with our high schools here, our teachers bend over backwards for our students. A lot of the time, our students are not necessarily turning in work or applying themselves. So some of them might be coming in from partner districts behind, possibly, but also I'd like to know, I mean, a lot of them are failing because they're
We go through and analyze each student, because we used to do it and say, well, this student, you know, never showed up, or, hey, this student showed up every day, but he didn't turn in any work, or this student, you know, so, I mean, we could go through and look at it, you know, every single one, because we used to do that, and I'm sure the principals, you know, still do that, but you know, for me, it's a conversation about, well, you know, let's look at, you know, some of the commonalities there, and then what is it that we could be doing differently, you know, to be able to move these students and to be able to engage them in the educational process. And it might not be in the classroom, because I know some of the students in there. I know there was one student that I talked to, he took 5 credits. He, you know, he sat around probably most of the school year, most of the second semester. It's like, you know, he was just kind of checked out. It's like, okay, I'm going to go into or 2.5 credits. You know, so it's just, you know, finding that right learning environment. So I think we're on the track for some of the things that we're doing and some of the, you know, the goals that the board has set. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to focus on the negative because I think this is awesome. 203 students are, that many credits, and to give them but I think it's something we really need to take a look at.
I think another, that discussion that we have administratively is how much are grades a reflection of what a student knows to do versus how much they actually do, right? When you start parsing this out and start looking at percentages and you see a student has a 59% failed the course, like what was the one assignment that he could have turned in for 10 points and he would have passed, right? So we get into those, they're pretty big, kind of heady discussions, and it gets into that realm of being a teacher, independent contractor within my room. Have this target out here for you, and my intention is for you to complete it, but if you don't hit the bullseye the first time, you get a 0. Those kind of things. So, all part of a greater discussion. I think overall, you know, again, pleased with the effort of summer school and the credits that the kids were able to pick back up. You know, we look at it another way. You know, you figure every 20, 25 students that fails a course, that's a section back in the high school that you have to recreate. And so when you're backfilling your course schedule with course failures for graduation requirements, it's away from elective opportunities. You have to have those credits to graduate. So, yeah, it was good.
I know you chose English just random, but, overall, are there higher failure rates in required courses than in elective courses? Is it, I mean, because that's what we offer in the summer schools, but, I mean, it would be really, because that would imply that perhaps alternative methods are more important, that when the students pick their classes, they're okay with them, and when they're stuck in English 101, they're.
And I would say it changes. I haven't been able to analyze the data, you know, over the last 5 years, but looking, you know, at, looking at English was one of the higher ones, and, you know, so I would really wanted to kind of dive into that. You know, science has always been, one that was up there, but I guess I was pleasantly surprised it wasn't that high. You know, math is usually up there, so there's kind of, you know, it changes, you know, a little bit, from year to year, at least from my past experience, but I just chose you know, the English, just because I really wanted to dive down. There was 31, you know, it was pretty 11.5% across the district, so I kind of wanted to analyze that. That's why I was following my screen here, and Matt's like, you want to go to the next slide? I'm like, Denise, well, I'm done, I'm already down at the bottom, I don't know where you guys are. I guess you can't see my screen, right, Denise? That's why the next presentation will have to get up and move around, so I know a little bit better. Any other questions on that? We really try to take the pause.
Denise, do you have anything?
I don't have any additional.
Next up is our safe return to schools and continuity of service plan. Anything, Micah?
Nothing new.
Okay.
Old study.
Work study topic.
I'm going to lead into the work study topic, with the caveat that there are 2 items on there. Water. No, closet, yes. And we can. I would, do you want to take that? Quick break, or do you want to power through?
I prefer to power through. Fun, let's break.
There's restroom, there's waters in that closet too, if you'd like one. So anyway, there are 2 items on this. One is enrollment capacity, and the other is long-range facility plan, and we combined, the PowerPoint into two PowerPoints, and, I'm gonna let, Matt and Pete take the first part of the PowerPoint to, just talk about where we're at enrollment-wise, capacity-wise within our building, and then, I'm going to present a little bit about long-range facility planning, and we aren't asking the board to decide anything tonight. We get really wrapped up in this stuff. We're kind of nerds when it comes to this kind of data and this kind of information. But it also leads to a lot of unanswered questions. And so this is for the board to kind of, is ruminate the right word? Ruminate on, for the next couple of weeks. And then likely what you're gonna see is a recommendation from me, based on discussion tonight, at our next board meeting. So that's my segue into turning it over to Matt and Pete, and I'm gonna drive, and they're gonna talk.
Like I said, we've been looking at this for, quite a while. It's actually started discussing numbers. Workshop, we've been zooming in and out of this conversation, and this is a zoom back out. So when we're talking about, what our building capacities are and how we use our space, these are 4 general categories that all schools look at. So the first one is, you just look at your physical size of your instructional space. Bodies, how big are the bodies that you're putting into those? Size limits, accreditation in our elementary schools is 20 kindergarten per second, then it goes to 30 at fifth grade. So, you know, how many? And the schedule of use. So you'll see, like a use is at each classroom space, and then you start getting into different options. You have an A schedule, a B schedule, and use a different space during other teachers' prep periods. There's lots of different ways you can schedule the programs that are offered in the schools. Some require more physical space, or you have to set up the space to accommodate students that are in the room. The programs offered by the school, and those are the 4 main considerations that are universally looked at. And also keep that zoomed out look. Walk into our building, you see that we have spaces or classrooms that have just been carved up, right? You go, gee, well, that it was like this big, and now there's a wall here, and there's a little wall here. And it's because there's buildings were, depending on the era that one of our buildings was constructed, it was probably constructed for the purpose of it up until that point. We added something else that we moved, and so we try to take and restructure our buildings to fit the current.
For example is, we're sitting in a large lecture room.
Currently, you see that kind of the 2000. Currently, there's spaces. What does space look like? You design a modern than regular day for students. This is a snapshot, and I just had to freeze where we are in the elementary school. If I duty work as elementary school, is about 16. Human being and a very diligent worker, and you'll see that we're running into some challenges where we're trying to maximize the space we have at schools. We can't have overcrowded grade levels and overcrowded classrooms. So when that happens, a group of kids has to move to a school, partner schools, so geographically they can stay close together. Categorize them in no order, so you have special and in combination. Those in that grade level, and broad in combination, that's available in that grade level. Total. So if everything worked out just perfectly, we got the students that were the right age, in the right school, we would have room for 181 students. And you go through the graph, you're like, well, geez, we got room for 181 students, but we're over in 2, in Edgerton in first grade, but we're actually probably over 8. We've already moved over 2. That's where that shakes out. You want to go to the next slide? I guess I didn't include it, I thought I did, but we currently have 41, it might show up later, I'll talk about it. We have 41 students that are out of neighborhood. And, but we have a really good job of keeping the list prioritized when a new family moves out of neighborhood students. Our district last year, the kid already started. I think we did this year is we moved 3 staff. We asked 3 staff members either change grade level. That saved us moving about 50 kids. That's unwelcome when you're in the teaching profession. As related earlier to the industry or a store, and you get hired for Costco, and then you get transferred to Safeway. You're technically still working at a grocery store, but it's a little bit different than what you signed up for. That's the equivalent of education. But that also goes into the equation. So we would, we'd be closer to 90 out of neighborhood.
Does 41 include, out of neighborhood school by choice? Some people say, I'd rather be at this school.
I think it's just out of neighborhood, not by choice. Don't keep on the waiting list if it was like. This number is more of a global picture of where we are in enrollment over the years by grade level. And Mike and I spent a lot of time talking about this. And I think we've reached a happy consensus. The numbers on the far right are an A and B number. And as you know from finance and kind of how we calculate A and B, it's not actually the number of students, it's actually a formula. The number of students you have times 187, how many contract days, divided by 180. But you take that enrollment number twice and then you average them. Another complexity is when the numbers decrease, the state of a 3-year average. Enrollment starts to drop. So you don't get dinged the first year when your enrollment drops because the state of and nothing. And so you get to bank on that 3-year average. So when you look at the 2020, 21, we actually, if we're just basing A and B off of a straight up student count, that number would be much lower. So what this graph represents is we had like a 17-18 enrollment that peaked around 18-19, started to dip in 19-20. COVID happened. And when COVID happened, elementary kids stayed home. And we had a lot of high school families, I'm assuming, that said, hey, we're already paying for these online classes and the school's doing it free, so why don't we just, high school enrollment went up, elementary enrollment went down, but we hung on to that 3-year average. And last year, we had a big bump, but it was really just a bump in getting all of our kids back. So last year, we were just above the 18-19 number, which was our previous high. Next year, it's not an A and B number that I'm talking about, it's a student number. It does not include and I know it's kind of up and down, but the main thing, if you're just doing a visual in your head, is, 17, 18, we're starting to tick up, and we had this drop, it was accelerated by COVID, and then we came back to that previous high, and now we're going higher than we've been in the last 10 years. To a 10-year average, we're like 1%. If you look at the last 2 years, we're like, this is supposed to be discussion.
So we increased our ranking was built during that. So twice as big as 6 other schools, so we have added, 18% more.
Actually added 7 classes. 7 classrooms were taken away. We added significant. So we have small buildings like Elrod. They have half or less than half. Agency for schools. Yes, there's a slide, yes. So when we talk about capacity, things that so the closer we get to that word capacity, the things go away. Like, if you keep kids in the neighborhood, class sizes exceed OPI standards, you saw some red numbers. I don't plan on moving those. We're over by 1 student in a class. I can keep students in that their neighborhood class, their neighborhood school. We're going to do that. It's when we start to get 2 students over, 3 students over per classroom per grade level. That's a new OPI accreditation. Hard to justify one at one school being 2 kids over and a classroom down the road at a different school that's 6. Science labs exceeding recommendations for science and safety. This really has to do with any labs or any of those lab spaces. They're have the benefit of having all kids do it over the number that's recommended. These are more middle school and high school issues. Opportunities to take. This and graduation requirements, you can't get in, and then also specific to the elementary, we're talking about getting to a capacity and what we're talking about is every room in the building used for a classroom, so it's classroom for sure. Also needs commandeering some other spaces that we for a different purpose. And say, hey, we're looking for rate. Those spaces away. Example of that would be at Peterson, where we have a nice full for special. We aren't. Hey, we're happy about making. Happy we had to. Well, I think that we did that and made some of those changes. Here's the section that we current structure of how our buildings are set. We're up there, full disclaimer, there's actually two spaces in that building, over 550, that we get dinged for all sorts of stuff. There first. Russell, we could have 3 sections. Peterson, we could have 3 sections. Elrod, we could have 3, total of 8. And again, this is like perfect scenario, right? It's all the little snowflakes falling in the right hole. You shifted around, or you absolutely didn't care about Edgerton, and now goes to school at Elrod because fourth grader we have a spot open at Elrod. Sibling in the there's a spot at Elrod, but we moved Bill. Don't account for any of those things. You can embrace all those uncomfortable realities. Maximizing space. We would have room for 300 and analogy earlier today that it's like when you're laying a hardwood floor and you do a measurement of a room and you say, well, and you go and you order hardwood, you order that exact amount. You get in the project, you're like, oh, this doesn't work like that, right? You know, all exactly in the space for that's the number. More specific breakdown by building, partners. You can see that we partnered Edgerton and Russell Big School. In those classes, they have space for 27. Russell could add 3 sections. Average 20 for schools, 8 for 34 and 30 for years. So I came up with some more. Will together be 128. Here's an Elrod. You have a pretty big number. These sections between the actually over one state. I'm into one of those things. So the only add there is just that happens. We look out into the future. When I drive around town, I see the development. Really? The growth we're seeing isn't fitting inside the neighborhood boundaries. And we'll look at doesn't coincide with moving specialty programs. We look at the life skills program. We have 3 life skills in Rankin or in that top 2 schools, 2 sections. Option could be to move the life skills. I'm not proposing it. Start considering things like that. You're really considering a lot of life skills program. A lot of time and effort and energy. Pull it, and you have to hate it. very short sell. Shifting to the middle school is a really, a much shorter discussion. They say they're at capacity. So they mirror a lot of what you'll hear about from, what we're dealing with at Flathead House. Both the classroom spaces that can use in pocket travel, and they'll double up and they'll use classroom. And we also have some issues to where we put some specialty programs in adequate, and we've done our best. Adequate is not used. And this is the rollout for sixth, seventh, eighth grade. When we read our A and B reports, just as a note, it's always lumped in with the elementary. Our K-6 budget, or not budget, K-6 A and B number, as a greater count high, which gets high school funding. We're making them part of the elementary. These numbers, yeah, that same story with A and B, that's not. That number does. 2022, 2000 students, so our number of students is already A and B number, the A and B always bigger than. We're in those kids. The sixth grade, keep it clear, the sixth grade is historically low. And you'll see if you just follow the waterfall down, the numbers don't take any students out. And then we have a relationship with Preston where you're like I said, we're full, we're a few states. One of the things I've lived through my life, I was born and raised here, I actually lived. There's always this comment in the community. A little bit uneasy. I think if there is fine, as a teaching model.
Like neither, they the kids in town or the kids out in our districts where they're coming their first time in this big environment. You're a freshman. So they're getting it from all ends too, and they all go through that transition of little fish in a really big pond.
I get it. I think if we're to see increased growth at the middle school under the current structure, the feedback from the for considered as
What can specifically have, the ability to expand the structure itself? There was space there to
I don't know anything about that.
Glacier, but not Hannah.
Just before I get into, just on the high school side, just kind of want to give you about that, but, Matt gave a lot of credit to Judy for all the work she did as far as shifting, students and trying to keep them in their neighborhood schools. Matt was working on that since I came on. Worked with parents, he's worked with the building administrators, and, getting that whittled down to 41 students is no small task, because I watched him work, and those are difficult conversations, not only with the parents, but the administrators and the teachers. He did an exceptional job, with that. So, just taking a look at, here's just a snapshot of the high school, and we just took enrollment count of 817, and we're dealing with a lot of different numbers. So if you look at, Mike pointed that out, 17, 10, 5, and 6 doesn't add up to 50. It was 50, they moved up, things kind of got shifted, but that number 3156 is correct. And again, we're looking at total enrollment numbers, we're not looking at the A and B, so we look for those numbers to go up once we get those counts. They'll go up, slightly maybe in October, a little bit different than by the time you get the February count and then you average them together. We know we start the registration process back in February. We get to the school, everybody's full. I remember running around in the classrooms and, well, how many bodies do you actually have in your room? Because we're home, we can't have over 30 or we get a ding. So looking at it, we know some move out or some aren't coming back. So we really know, these numbers are going to shift, but this is our best count as far as enrollment on 817, so 56. We'll talk a little bit, just about, the current enrollment, but we'll also talk about, the historical enrollment, and then a little bit about, capacity too, kind of setting the stage for what Micah wants to talk about to finish. Again, taking a look, numbers from 17, 18, again, all the way through 22, those are A and B counts, and 31 enrollment counts. Basically at 18, 29, 87, a slight dip, and then we're down a little bit, and then again, coming out of COVID, here we go, and again, if you take a look at the last couple of years, we're at 7 or 8 across the board, trying to really dial in on. I like that. For ninth grade. History. History, all right. And just to kind of go back, so, when we're talking building capacity, the physical size of the instructional space, class size limits, at the high school, again, your science labs are 24, you really don't want to put 30, out into the wood shop for reasons, we can go to 30 in social studies, which are special ed classrooms, are really limited, and so taking a look at the capacity in the space is something we really want to try to dial in on, the schedule of uses, thank goodness, we have the Ag Center and we have the LEC, so that takes a lot of pressure off of our high schools, because if we didn't have those, can you imagine, what things would look like, without some of those opportunities, start and, just the, when we talk about, the high school capacities, one thing, that I've been looking at, and, been around the district a long time, and we've always said, hey, the capacity of Flathead High School is 1,800, and that's before we even did all of, basically, model. And if you look at the capacity at Flathead High School right now, I would say it's at capacity, as compared to, how we've always calculated that is, as a district, it's been student driven. We start with the schedule in February. And then we say, okay, let's take a look, how many students signed up, for FCS? And then how some of it's based off FTE, some of it's based off of instructional spaces, and then some of it's based off of class size. In Glacier High, they share a lot of spaces, and I'll use it as an example of that. We use the capacity. There's a couple different ways to do it. So I think when they initially calculated Glacier High School, they always used gross square footage, divided by the number of classrooms, and then you come up with a current enrollment or current student capacity. That's at 50. Right now, they're at 1,450, and I'm going to show you a graph a little bit where, I would say they're over capacity. Students can't certain classes, so they're limiting them. 60 students are sharing. Look at, even 62 classrooms, really, they don't even have that many. Two are team room, and one is a closet. Capacity of FHS, 1,800 students. Not all of them share a classroom, but 75 classroom spaces. Could we find more space? Yeah, we could. Put this room off, can you set up a classroom here? That would be nice. So it's just kind of how you're using your space. So we get more in there, but as far as teaching spaces that were created actually for that purpose, they're pretty much a pretty good. Right, and I did look at, that and talk. A good example. So in 21, 22, GHS to FHS transfers, we approved 62. From FHS to GHS, there was 56. This year, there from Glacier to Flathead, there's 38. And Flathead to Glacier, there's. Look at Glacier High School. So they're sending over 50 students, a year. And obviously, it just kind of worked out because it's about 100 over the last year. Well, that's 200 students that are going from Flathead High School to Glacier over a 4-year period. And if you use math analogy of, hey, we can't take anybody else in Rankin, so what we need to do is we need to send this person from Rankin to Russell, but guess what? If you're in Russell and you want to go to Rankin, or you can't, because there's no. So, that's the balance. That's a tough decision. Hey, the kids from Flathead, or kids from Glacier can go to Flathead, but the kids from Flathead can't go to Glacier. That would take care of, about students as far as enrollment and open up. What we do with, that's tough.
Complicated.
That's a whole other one. That's another 60 slide presentation.
I was just saying it's a difficult.
Yeah, no, it's a challenge, and it's you say, hey, there's. They really liked it when out of neighborhood, but she figures it out. And
We have roads to go to.
There was some, I guess, when I was back here that they could jump on and catch a shuttle. They would have to meet in a specific. You might be meeting. Most of the time when they're doing that, parents. Micah knows this building a little bit better, so he might want to chime in here, but I use it as an example. They calculated it off of 62 rooms, but really there's 59 teaching spaces. The girls' team rooms, those really are. F-110 is closet with 14 max, and it is used period of the day. But what I wanted to point out was the staff members that share a classroom. I remember the day when Flathead is like, all of your work on a cart, and we had some teachers every single period, 5 periods a day, you know, they were moving their cart around and going, and that's exactly what they have, you know, not to that extent in high school, but there's a lot of moving. You know, so those are some of the things we need to consider, you know, when we're taking a look at that capacity, and then, like, you know, what does that look like, you know, down the road? How do we really want to go through and I'll give you a perfect example. So when we were here in 2016, you know, when we passed the bond in order to build the elementary, you know, I can tell you that the HS administration, what about glaciers? Eventually, glacier is going to be capacity, you know, like trying to think ahead and where we're at in 6 years capacity. You know, but at the time, hey, we're trying to make that, and then how do we pass, you know, a bond in order to need. So really trying to get out in front of something, really analyzing the data, really looking at it, looking at math. It's like, look at the growth. Where's the growth? And then they started saying, I would pay. I just go back to college and I started driving around and, oh my God, they're building apartments over there. What are they building over here? What are they building over there? So Michael will get into that a little bit. We're really trying to set the stage and work to do. But again, Matt talked about grade level and partner schools, shifting the schools. And I talked a little bit about the BOAG and the LEC. You know, the transfer request. You know, there's 200 that should be at Flathead High School. Hey, no more. You're not going to Glacier, but Glacier, you can come to Flathead. That's talking point. Then, learning and transformation. My hand, hey, we can do this or this. Here's opportunities for students, and you know, what impact does that have on it? Brad, all the way is really on board. It's like, hey, if we have more opportunities for students, we'll create more space for these students that aren't able to get into some of their elective classes. How do we do that outside? So those are some more things that we need to go down the road and this is where I take over. Yep, you have it. I know you were just itching.
And any questions at any time, as we're talking. So, this is just looking at our enrollment numbers, you know, pockets here and there and kind of spread out. Over year starts to add up. 5.6 real bodies and real states. So we're gonna just, and I met with, Sorensen and Ivan, Friday. And this was something that he and I met last year and we talked about. I said, well, can we get this up? Oh, yeah, sure, come on over. We'll get it. And I know this isn't very big, but this is a project on this side that is being proposed as single house type. You see some of these numbers. Eagle Valley Ranch on the east side of Highway 93, the state, 125. Kalispell Town Center, all of these projects are, these are projects that have either been approved or in some sort of approval with the,
On that, does that include, outlying areas like Lakeside, Summers, Kyla, or is that just Kalispell?
Yeah, you're catching on. So, this is what they told me last year. These were some of the approvals, they looked at about 5,000 units, a 10-year build out, there's now 120 units per year. The city, from an infrastructure standpoint, for water and sewer and utilities, this past 1,200 permits. Per unit, that's saying that right now, projected growth, and there's some things that could affect that, economy can affect that. We are the fastest growing micro city in the U.S. Georgia that we bypassed, and Bozeman that we bypassed. Now we're saying 1,000 units per year. And so these next slides, they're actually courtesy of the city of Kalispell. Last year they kind of did some bubbles. And then this was the one that they gave us. Right line. Our transportation. Scroll down a little bit, I can't read. So, right here, dividing line between the apartment buildings, there's side of the line, I'm going to Whitefish. Others on this side of the line, I'm going to Kalispell city limit. Doesn't necessarily mean that those.
So where is that? What's the road?
Church Drive, and it actually jogs, you have to get in and see, there's all sorts of little jogs. Happen. I was approached by the developers, so this is Overbrook. That block is where they're building. Church Drive runs right along here, but they wanted to know if we would, consider annexing part of Whitefish's district into our district. Which is a process that could actually happen, but I expect a really long legal battle because Whitefish School District isn't going to.
The money. Sure.
Right? But we'll just say, hey, you know, if you want to come to.
This spot over here, does that go into like West Valley District?
This is West Valley, yeah.
Right,
I'll,
so if you
I'll
go.
give you a little more detailed map. There's just a second. Yeah, all of this over here is West.
You go down a little bit, you have a big red block right where your hand is,
Yep.
yeah, and it looks like the line
Yep.
kind of goes through that.
Fine.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
West Valley School District. City limits of California. Bridge, kids sport, Glacier, high school. We'll go to the next slide. Your new residential units, 2010, 2021. Average these out, we're about 100, 200, 460. So next slide is the type of unit. Brown represents multi-family apartments. Orange is duplex townhomes. Yellow is single family residence. What they say is that as the permits come, developers will actually start. Well, we planned on, this, but we realize we can get more money with greater density, apartment building on those 4 lots, 4 numbers will actually. Then they had this great slide deck of all these different subject properties that are gonna be developed. So right up here is Peterson Elementary. Where up there is where they're putting in the 4 apartment buildings on the end of Meridian Court. So our district's maintenance shop is just a little bit back. And this is, I used to call this the moat, where the developer is like, dug out a bunch of material and he was gonna build a golf course there. Lost the property, banked on it, sold it. Right. Impressive. That's in your neighborhood. So imagine, or I go back to the slide, Peterson Elementary School, which has some room in it to grow. Properties going in, there's so many properties going in. Parkland Trail, all of those different things. So that's one that will definitely have. Next one, yeah. So Glacier High School, this is in the West Valley Elementary District. In the high school district. They add duplexes. That would be. That's gonna be north of us because we're talking about Bluestone. Oh, that's down at, right there. There's Rankin, they were great. These are all apartment buildings. They said, well, they may actually change that.
Do they, I know when I was in the fire department in Nevada, there's per new house or new building, new, family residence, there's a certain amount that the developer has to pay to like fire department, police department. Do they do that here for schools?
Wow. No. The only thing that developers are really beholden to districts, schools, can be. Those are long, protracted conversations. The city council. That, it would be kind of a gesture, developer in the district to have those conversations. Literally, at least once a week, I get a document from either the county planning department or the city that says, hey, this development's going in, here's the plat, here's how many, what, and then they ask. It doesn't matter what I say, it's still gonna get developed if that's what they do. That's been kind of a falls and whitefish are some of the big. Really, it puts the speaking for. So, out everybody. So preliminary single home, 899, 209. So just to refresh, district, north of that 600 apartment unit, property just south of Rankin, Dave Warner, I said, hey, just keep $80 million for an 800 student middle. $80 million. Here, you know, middle school, these were just, we'll talk about all sorts of ideas here in a minute. The middle school, elementaries were really overcrowded because we consider those kind of conversations. We also own this up here, that little white chunk, 12 acres, that's that. For basically the two building sites. The talking about. Yeah.
When you say we have those, we own those?
We own them.
Okay.
So I want to talk a little bit about long range. When it comes to our two components that we have. We refer to as our strategic or educational. Those two goals. How do we do that? I think it's, you know, talk anecdotally about just some of this and Pete put together. Right. Just what would you say? What do we need to build first? What do we need to do first? High school? Do you think we need an elementary school? Right? Anecdotally, we can look back and say, yeah, you know, I think this is what we need to do, but so many options that you can. And so long is really. You go to the next slide. So what is it? It is basically, and I thought about including this in the couple hundred pages, and really an analysis of data and questions for our educational all together, and you're asking someone to say, give me your best recommendation. Science. So why should we do this? And I kind of touched on these things. What the slides are, but we need to gather and organize this information. Other things that we've done in previous building years. How do we ensure that the boundary line isn't the lowest? Reappropriate. We need to appraise the actual. Look at them and say, gosh, we did this a little bit with the elementary. There is a long list of needs. Even when 10 years go by, there's over. As an example, we talked a little bit about the window project. Pull out all the old windows and put new windows in. The new windows are nice and square. Openings, lighting. It really takes an appraisal and evaluation of existing facilities. Maybe a recommendation comes out of it. Level LRI. need to have about, remember last year, or maybe we need to expend some capital. It's kind of, and we have to have the data. It's a coordination of and statisticians and board members and community people at the decision what we need to do and having a very last time we have a long range before we built how are they developed? One, we have to recognize that it's what we talk about and how we want to also takes a yes, Micah, this is something we need to do. And part of that is me making the case tonight. And it's, so it's making that commitment. It's a lot of time for the right people at the right time. So, a big component of these conversations, being that everything comes out of the wash and say, yep, how are we going to tell? So, and then just, anticipating those community needs. I think the conversation that Matt and I had with, we start to look at how solving the problem for a year from now. We know this is happening. So, 4 components to it. One is the educational program. Have that with, we're in a phase. We talk about long range. We need to build, incorporate, and pull in. Maybe we can partner with community college. The big picture of what we want for our kids and how we're going to get the educational facilities. That is really just about how we I'll let that answer some calls. But it's, and what is the structure? Are we through 6th grade? Is it 5th grade? Are we going to have 5? Demographic studies. That's years ago we had 2 statisticians from who looked at sections. You account statistics. How does that tie into growth in the valley? But you brought up the point. Not right now, but someone's going to have to take a look at what's happening in West Valley. Money in the 20 housing units. 20 is a big number. And then the implementation plan. Really, what at the end of this, what you really hope for is that you have to take this for Next slide, they just, I just talked through all of them in that first. Small. For those maps. How are we gonna get there? That slide? Comments?
Micah, do you anticipate the state legislature being of any assistance in this growth process?
No, I don't. You know, one of the things is I was, never led along.
When you're talking about, or when Matt was talking about, the capacities of these schools and saying that they're at capacity or over capacity, and the capacity is like for, I think, for our Flathead was 18. And it says that the current enrollment's 1,500 something. Does that include teachers being at the school? Like, is that the capacity of the building, or is that capacity for students?
That's capacity for students, and that would be at 100% capacity like Glacier. Almost was, it's usually calculated at 75% of your 1,800 students, and assuming like Matt talked about in every room and kind of line them up, and that would be traveling like you're doing it.
So when we have, if they're at capacity right now, I mean, from the presentation you guys gave, it makes me cringe and think, oh my gosh, we need to do something tomorrow and get these schools built. But how far can you go past that capacity? You know, if we're already over capacity, where is the over? If capacity is 100%, how far can we go over that to?
You have to start getting creative, because like I said, you know, I hit high school when we were in 90s, early 2000s, you know, we had every single classroom you were using, you know, closets. I think the reading room upstairs, you know, which was reading room. So you do have room, but if you're not planning, there's a point in time, you know, then what are you looking at doing then? You look at going to like they used to do. So, I mean, there's ways, you know, there's ways around it, and I mentioned this. Flathead right now, I would say, is a capacity because of company. The more students you get into a building, the harder it is basically to manage, the more issues you have. And I think that is filling up at Glacier High School. But I'd say 79 teachers are that's just current reality. Yeah, can we put some more in there? Yeah, we have environment and, you know, for our students, no. We're trying to project. We've gone through this. It is, I mean, I really didn't get, you know, too worried about it until I started looking at all the looking around town, and it's like, oh my gosh, we need to do something. I really believe that.
Do we have any guesstimate on a timeline as far as how fast this, you know, like it said, we're the fastest growing micro city? Do we have any guess on a timeline when something needs to happen? I mean, when school needs to open doors compared to the amount of growth that we're having in the valley?
Again, it depends on how. You know, biology and
one last question, and then I'll give it up to my other board members. But, with how long from the day it's decided that we're gonna build a new school, whatever it may be, after we take this, how long till the school? Approximately. That's what I wanted.
Yeah, so really what I'm asking, what I'll be asking of the architects that high school, we need, then you're into a process of how they're not gonna, remember before Glacier built, they went out to the vote, it failed. Later, it passed. All your taxpayers, that is a clear plan. For middle school or elementary, we have options, but it's right. I would even wonder about, you look at West Valley, they want to build a what would it look like if we these are just all options, and these are the conversations we're having like every day. I just think, you have a parallel track, but I just want to point out. My basis is we're hiring 5 new. It's actually good that 5 teachers are hiring those 5 teachers, not any additional. The other thing that Denise is responsible for, all are, but the burden here. We still have an operating budget. Versus, if we go here, right, we actually have 2 over at those bases. Where not only the teacher, the counselor, already the biggest. Russell, right here now, classroom teachers, and they can be folded into that envelope. The other thing I don't want to lose track of is our first objective.
that's gotta remain the focus. Bring a plug in there. When you outsource, so they're asking, also allow them. Sharing that between. Shifting it from one. These are all just silly. I do know.
Mike, as we move forward, I think it's important too to, part of the education of the community is not just the need to build it, but to actually support it.
Yeah.
I don't know if this story is true from a prior trustee, but they said they were prepared as a board when they built Glacier High School not to open it. That's the last time they passed the levy. They needed that extra $1 million to open Glacier High School. That's just something to be aware of moving forward. We're gonna be losing the extra money, and we're gonna need revenue to support whatever we build. If we build.
Yep. But there's other options in there too, classrooms to capacity that we have. We're building the spot onto like classrooms, capacity's up a little bit now.
So at this point, I think that if financially, if we were to just build a new elementary school, our operating budget wouldn't support a new, would actually. So I think those plans build your capacity. But, I also just want to say the principals are talking about this, so we've been talking, you know, hey, what we do, or are we talking about? But there's lots of options. Everything's been discussed for year-round school. We could try school. I think in the we're gonna make sure we provide for that. Partner school approach, you could do a K-2 experience at one partner school, and then, or however it broke out, pull part of kids together because of relationships. And you could do shifts, it's transportation, and that you utilize it for a long period during the day. So we'll do whatever needs to be done, take care of kids, but I pointed out several times, it takes a while to get this thing going. Okay.
So here's my thought. It is pretty obvious that we have got to kick here and start thinking about a facility plan. The first step is the board has to make a decision. Are we going to hire a professional? Or consultants that do that? It's gonna cost some money, which, as Lance was saying, it's a little difficult to do right now. However, when you look at the information here, we don't have time to waste. Homes and apartments are being built. So, Michael, what is your thought? At the next board meeting, can we put together an RFP for
Can I
a
ask one
consulting
question?
firm?
About a consulting firm. So if we're looking at a consulting firm, will this individual, I know they specialize in this, but are they also gonna keep in mind, I mean, our main focus this year, getting some of those butts out of the, will he focus or she focus on that and keep that at the core of not necessarily, we definitely need a new building? Because I wanna make sure that that individual is wrapped around exactly what we're focusing on.
And that'll be part of that whole process, because that is, something that's really important, yeah.
About the
The
program.
first step in that component. That's what, or whatever it is, that becomes part of that.
Similar to what we did with Eileen with our strategic plan, where we collaborated, we all kind of got to throw ideas out of what we were envisioning working with this individual.
Yes, and I would say there's probably a lead for, the firm, but it'll be a number of individuals involved in this, and then we would work with not only the board, but there's parents, administrators, community members. They're gonna try and pull together a pretty diverse group to take a look, and then you're gonna have those times when you sit down and you brainstorm and like, what if? And then I would say it's probably gonna be a little more technical and a little more involved.
Timeframe is our board meeting too soon, or?
No, what we would do is we would, look to develop a request for qualifications. So that would be a public notice, you put it out there, and then they have all these clearinghouses and all the architects are looking at them and, oh, here's an opportunity to come in and we'll, work with the district to be able. So then we would have a number of firms that would apply, their qualifications, and we'd be very specific on what we're looking for. And then we would, interview, those firms and make a decision who we would want to go with. And then you enter into the contract, phase with them once you select it. And through an RFP or an RFQ, the district, the board always reserves the right to not go with someone if you can't come up with a contract settlement. Not too dissimilar to what we did for engineering services. And Morrison Merrily was have them under contract in 5 to 7 years. Probably why Jordan's here. Did I miss anything at all of that, Jordan? Okay.
So, Mike, have you been looking, you mentioned 5 states.
we've been looking at leaning towards or dates or
Have not.
we just know that this is what we have to do?
Do you know of other districts that have had this opportunity, and have you been able to, and then for these firms?
Yes, the district, probably, one of the districts closest to us was Matt Jensen's district. Work. They had the transformational learning, grant. I think, there are components of what, Matt did in his district as they worked through that certainly are applicable to what we're doing. I think we've taken it to the next level in terms of broadening the vision of the district and what it means. And there's a lot of things that are in place now from a legislative standpoint and a policy standpoint that weren't in place when. Yeah, we're very aware, some districts, really minimal type efforts of, hey, we're just gonna waive some graduation credits, and that was the extent of their transformation. Versus probably more of a wholesale.
Me too, I mean, if you take a look at, Matt brought up Centralia on there, but I guess looking at transformational learning in one of the districts out there, which Micah put me on, that at Kettle Moraine. And that's where I was going through and just trying to have a better understanding of that, and there was one transformational learning. Kind of been going through that and looking at it, how have they done that, but, I would imagine this is. I've thrown a 200-pager in there, or 600 pages, so there's, there's just a lot out there to look at, but, it does transformation. Yeah.
When, going back to the building survey, or basically having a consulting group come in, would they be able to do a phased assessment? So, right now, this is where you're at, but your projected growth is here. So if we're gonna pay that much to have somebody come in, get a little bit more bang for our buck, or maybe even get a little bit more at what would ideally be a little bit of a discount. Right now, this is what you need to add on to Elrod Elementary. Okay, but then as you grow, this is the second place third place you go. Well, we could do something like that.
Yeah, and what I would, hope, from a long-term perspective and kind of get into the details of some of the things I was talking about with the long-range facility plan is that it's something that gets a relook every 5 years, so you're not starting over from scratch to add on to what that is. But I would think that, looking at a enrollment projection for 20 years out, and it's like, okay, here we are at 20 years, here's our current capacity, here's what we think we need in the next 5, here's what we need in the next 10. And I think it's just, in a lot of ways, it's really exciting to be thinking that where you could be making decisions that are going to impact generations from now.
I made a joke about it earlier. You drive by some of these developments. It was cool. And Mike reminds me, like, hey, calm down. Look at that map, that's a 10-year rollout. And so we are keeping that in mind. With the city, and we're looking at these things. They say last year that it was 500 per year, and now they're saying year. So, hey, you gotta factor that in there also. But we're talking about these developments currently on the books for build out, and there's gonna be more, right? There's gonna be something.
Any, I mean, a ballpark figure, what a consultant would,
Could be more, depending.
now, there are so many moving parts to this, that this is going to take a lot of time and a lot of resources. But it is pretty exciting to make the decisions for down the road. I would like to see us, put together an RFQ all rolling. We don't know, what this would take. There's, going to be all kinds of new things moving. I mean, we've got charter school issues that are out there also. Opportunities to partner with other districts, so we can work together with programs. So if it's possible, can we get an RFQ out, or can we put it on next? Oh, gosh. Well, I say let's do it.
Here's what I would say. I would like to put it on the next board agenda as an action item. I just wanted the board to have to come here today, listen to all this information. I really want you to think about it and ask questions, and if you need more information or if you want to do your own research, I completely encourage that. But then what I would look at, and from an RFQ standpoint, is having something in May that the board can actually say, all right, now we're ready to start making. We're talking, bond type issues. Operating levies, building reserve levies. I think one of the things that could parlay into this overall big picture is security for our buildings, and we need to incorporate that into a big lookout where, hey, we're not building a new high school, but we are going to improve security features at Glacier and Flathead High School, and it's going to cost this much, and we can get into a whole lot of other things too. But I think that's just being strategic and proactive in how you get a community to work. It's a lot of work, through building projects, Lance, for sure, with the elementary and Flathead High School key, part of that. All for good. And
So expect to see that on the agenda for next is January.
September.
Second.
13. I'm looking.
Oh, yeah.
Go to the next one. Upcoming meeting.
September 13th. I'll be here a week early.
All right, I got some work to do.
Some more work.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Pretty interesting stuff. I mean, your jaw drop open, mine too, so when you look at. Okay, thank you for putting all that together. Last thing on our agenda, public comment. Time for comment on public matters that are not on the main agenda. Members of the audience are encouraged to briefly address the trustees on an issue that is not on the agenda. Chairman of the board will seek comments from the audience on they occur. Matters do not include any pending legal matters, private personnel issues, private student issues. Please do not attempt to address such issues at this time, or you will be ruled out of order. Please note that individuals will be given 3 minutes for public comment, and time may be shortened to accommodate numerous speakers. Is there anyone who cares to make public comment? Okay, seeing none, the only thing is, our upcoming meetings and events, please look at those city meetings and board meetings. And, do you want to make a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Lloyd. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Heather. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting adjourned. I know. It's because it's.
I thought we needed to